What's up, y'all? I know I talk a lot about the half payment method, which is just a method in which you evenly divide up your expenses amongst each paycheck. So I decided to sit down and show you guys how to actually do this. This is a process that I did with clients whenever I was coaching. And so I'm going to show you how you can use the half payment method and just make sure that your start date is an actual safe start date and it doesn't overdraw your account. And if you have watched any of my budget with me videos, then you know I love using the half payment method. I do that for all of my bills. I have a separate bills account and all of my expenses are evenly divided amongst both paychecks. And I like doing this because it keeps your paycheck from being bill heavy. So if most of your bills are due the first half of the month, then that means that the first paycheck that you get is going to typically be bill heavier than the second paycheck. So it may seem like you have less money in the beginning of the month and then you have an abundance of money towards the end of the month. And I know for a lot of people, especially after coaching, that can trick certain people into thinking they have a lot more money towards the end of the month, and then they're feeling really squeezed again, or they don't have enough money to cover the expenses when the new month begins. So this just helps you to kind of even out all of your paychecks so that one is not heavier than the other. You can just evenly distribute it. So that way you can share the love amongst all of your paychecks, and it doesn't matter if you are paid bi-weekly, weekly. I've had clients that were paid weekly. I have clients that were paid every 2 weeks, and I also had clients that were paid on specific days like the 1st and the 15th. Does not matter, it can still work for you, and I am going to show you how to do it now. Okay, so we are in an expense tracker, which is what I would give my clients whenever we first started working together so that they could list all of their expenses. That includes groceries, not just the bills, what are considered bills. So here I did a little mock-up of what expenses could look like that would work for this example. So we have phone bill, mortgage, all of that good stuff. So we have the bill or the expense on this side, the anticipated amount due, as well as the day due of each month. And I have the day due of each month, or the typical day due of each month. And that way, whenever you plug it in on the calendar, you can see where that falls in regards to your paydays. So I'm going to do a little screenshot and keep it up on the screen just so you guys don't get whiplash as I'm going from like screen to screen. So here we go. Now, these days are not for 2023. This was 2022, but I just did not feel like going in and changing up the days. So just for this example, please don't get too technical. These are not the accurate days. So let's say we have the month of September and we're going to use someone who is paid on a bi-weekly basis or just twice a month. So paycheck number one's expenses, I have a color key up here, and that's so I can see what should be paid with paycheck number one's pay and what should be paid with paycheck number two whenever I start plugging in the expenses. Of course, you don't have to use pink or yellow, just whatever color works for you. And I like that because you visually see when it comes to the expense where those funds are going to be pulled from. So when it comes to our first expense, we have our phone bill, and our phone bill is due on the 1st. Even though this comes before, let's say, our next payday, in which we want to start doing the half payment method, that's fine. We still need to list that here. So when it comes to the next month, we can see how that needs to be taken care of. So these bills right here, these have already been taken care of by your previous paycheck or however you've regularly done it. So phone bill is due on the 1st, and then mortgage is due on the 1st. Our car note is due on the 25th. And this one's already highlighted. I'm going to take that one off. Cable is due on the 6th. Electric is due on the 1st. So as we can see here, one of our paychecks without doing the half payment method would be kind of bill heavy. Daycare is due on the 1st and the 15th. Not sure why some of these are bigger and some of these are smaller, but oh well. Therapy is due on the 20th. Student debt is due on the 15th. What am I doing? Okay. Life insurance is due on the 12th, which will probably come out on the 10th, but oh well. We'll just keep it right here. It's not really going to make that big of a difference. And last, we have Disney Plus that is due on the 23rd. All right, so let's say that we're not going to use the half payment method for every single expense, but more so just for our bills like mortgage, electric, daycare, our phone bill. Not so much Disney Plus. That's not really going to make a difference. And not so much therapy. Therapy's due on the 20th. I don't know why that's on the 12th. All right, so we have all of our expenses laid out on our calendar. So let's go in and start color coding things just based on how we want to divide these up, or which ones we want to divide up. So for cable, our cable bill is $84.99. It could be that we want to divide these up amongst both paychecks. So right now, starting off, if you want to start doing the half payment method by your next payday, for clients, I would just recommend going in and paying the expenses as you normally would right after payday. So for cable, we're just going to make it come from paycheck number 1. That's fine. And then of course, life insurance is going to have to be taken by paycheck number 1 as well, because we have not gotten paid just yet, as well as daycare and student loan. So that is how the month of September is looking so far. Now, when it comes to the last couple of expenses that we have, let's say we want to start small with therapy, which I always recommend starting small, like doing a couple at a time, because you may not have enough available in your account when these expenses come out to pay your bills if you start too early. So let's go with the half payment method for therapy. And Disney Plus, we're not even going to bother with Disney Plus. We'll just take that from paycheck number 2. And we also want to divide up our car note. So that would mean we would set funds aside from paycheck number 1 of the month. We would set half of that $386 aside in our account just to sit there waiting for it to be taken out. And then when paycheck number 2 comes in, that's going to give us the other half that we're needing. And so when our car note comes due, whether it's through auto pay or you pay manually, the funds are already there, available, ready and waiting for you to make the payment. So we have therapy and our auto loan starting off the month of September. All right, so now we are in the month of October, and typically I'll do a 3-month period. So I always recommend, if you are starting out with the half payment method, make a visual of the next 3 months so you can make sure that the way that you have it divided and the way in which your paychecks fall, you're going to have enough to cover each expense. And so going back to our expenses, we have our phone bill due on the 1st, as well as our mortgage and electric. So I'm going to copy and paste. And daycare as well. Wow. So I'm going to copy and paste this here. And then next we have our car note that is due on the 25th. All right, so I went ahead and just plugged in all of the expenses. And when you get to the second month, that is when, you know, moving things around, like you're really trying to make the puzzle pieces fit, just so you have an overview of everything that is actually complete. So you may find that you have to go back and adjust a few things when it comes to the previous month that you just did, but that's okay. I see finances and budgeting and everything else as like a math problem. Like you kind of have to go in there, work it out, show your work to figure out how this is going to work. So for October, as you can see, we get paid on the actual 1st. That is when our paycheck comes in for the month of October. Now going up here, we didn't do anything with these expenses because those have already been paid. So I'm going to assume they were paid by paycheck number 2, because paycheck number 2 is typically going to take, you know, the very last of the month's expenses and the very beginning of the new month's expenses, because your first paycheck of that month may take a few days. It may not hit until like the 8th, and you have to have funds aside to cover those bills that come before, like on the 1st. So here, these were probably taken by paycheck number 2 if you were not using the half payment method, right? I am going to go ahead and undo these. So that means without the half payment method, all of these would be covered by paycheck number 1. And obviously that's a large amount, and it's going to make paycheck number 1's budget super tight, and that is what we're trying to avoid with the half payment method. So going in, that means going back up to the month of September, we're going to have to create a budget for paycheck number 2 in which we're covering some of these expenses. Now it can be starting with the lowest amount. Mortgage is pretty high, so we can start with something like, you know, take the phone bill and the electric bill. So let's do that. We'll say that half of this is going to be covered by paycheck number 2, because this one is not very bill heavy. As you can see, there's just 3 expenses that we would be covering after payday for paycheck number 2, and everything else was paycheck number 1. And paycheck number 1 has some of the larger expenses. So we're going to go down here and take the phone bill, and we said, what did we say? Electric. Now when it comes to daycare, I don't recommend using the half payment method if you have an expense like this that is divided up, you know, twice or every 2 weeks within a month. You can just go and pay that from whatever paycheck comes before that amount is due. So daycare, we're just going to go ahead and cover that by paycheck number 1. We're not going to use the half payment method on that. And this should be yellow. And for next time, you'll see these fall in line with each payday. So daycare, second half of the month is going to take paycheck number 2. First half of the month, paycheck number 1 is going to cover that. So for our electric, we'll go ahead and use the half payment method on that, and then phone bill, half payment method. So that does take weight off of paycheck number 1 for the month of October, because we had half of our phone bill and half of our electric bill already put back in our account. And so when our next paycheck hits, that the other half is then going to be placed in that account, and that's going to equal the full amount that we need. So when that comes through, the funds will already be there. Now for the mortgage, it is still pretty hefty, and it's going to make paycheck number 1 pretty hefty, so we'll have to figure out a way to eventually split that, but that's probably not going to come until the month of November if you don't already have a good safety net put back in your bills account. But we'll look at that in just a minute. So with our cable bill, that's $84.99. I'm gonna go up here and see if we've already split that. No, we went ahead and took that from paycheck number 1. All right, so like I said, everything is just like a big, puzzle. So we're just trying to figure out how to make these parts work. Cable is not that much. Cable is $84.99, so a little over $40 a month. I think what we can do, since we've already paid mortgage from paycheck number 1, that's a big chunk of money. We will go ahead and say that for paycheck number 2 of September, we're also going to put aside half of our cable amount in our bills account. And that way, when it comes to the next due date, we would have already had half of the cable amount set aside. And so we just need a little bit more from paycheck number 1 to pay for that or get that bill knocked out. And that once again creates a bit more wiggle room in paycheck number 1's budget, which will allow us to increase our personal funds. If we didn't have much of any personal funds and we kept coming over, things like that, we'll have a bit more extra room in there to do that. So far we have cable that's half payment, phone bill has started its half payment, and electric will have started its half payment. We just have to work our way up to mortgage. So life insurance is $127 a month. We did not break that up for the month of September. So it could be personal preference here. If we want to have all of our bills eventually broken up, then we can start half payment as long as we have enough funds to pull from. And if we don't want to break up life insurance half and half, we just want to do like our major bills, then we can just leave this with paycheck number 1. And I believe this was paycheck number 1's expense. Yes, it was. So it was paycheck number 1's expense in September, and oftentimes it's going to stay the same each month. So it is paycheck number 1's expense in October. And let's go ahead and break it up, because we just had smaller amounts due compared to that mortgage. So let's give ourselves a bit more room. So that means that we would have pulled half of life insurance, which is about $60, from our last paycheck in September to prepare for this bill that's due on the 12th. So we broke that up so we don't have to pay the full amount from this paycheck, since it was already typically bill heavy. And now let's go to student debt. All right, camera died, but I'm back. So I believe we left off on the student debt, and I'm looking in September to see if we broke up student debt. No, we paid it from paycheck 1. And like I said before, if it typically falls on paycheck 1's responsibility, then it tends to stay there. But since on this month, it looks like student debt would come on the second paycheck of the month. And paycheck 1 is still kind of bill heavy because we were not able to split up that mortgage, just assuming. We can let student debt be paid by paycheck number 2 just to keep the weight off of paycheck 1. Therapy and student debt was pretty low, $84 a month. Therapy is next at $65. I don't believe that we split this one up so we can just keep this one on one paycheck. That would be paycheck 2. Disney Plus is tiny, so we'll keep that on paycheck 2. And then next up is our car note. And I do believe for September we did break up the car note. So yes. So we paid the first half, set that back on paycheck number 1. And then when paycheck number 2 came in, we put the rest back. And so when it was the 25th, probably the 24th, because the 25th is a Saturday, then it was able to be pulled in its entirety from the account. So that means that we would need to keep the same in rotation. So half of the car note would be pulled from paycheck 1, and then second half would come from paycheck 2. So we would have the full auto loan payment on the 15th, and it would just sit and wait until the 25th in our accounts to be taken out. Okay, so the way that this was here for this client, she had a 3 paycheck month, but we're not even going to touch that. That can be a completely different video. Now, when we go to our 3rd month, which would be November, then we could work into halving up that mortgage. So by paycheck number 2, when that comes around, since we don't have a lot of expenses being taken out of this paycheck, everything is pretty much half for our expenses, then we could start putting back, as long as we have the funds, we could start putting back half of that amount from this paycheck. And so when the next paycheck rolls around, which would be the 29th, which is our 3rd paycheck, once again, we're not going to touch the 3rd paycheck thing, then we would have half that payment up, and we would just keep that in rotation. I am not going to make this video super long by doing November, but you kind of get the idea of how we would make this work. Now, this is not set in stone. This is not set in stone because we have to make sure that we have enough to break up these expenses during the time that we say that we are. And by doing that, you would obviously go in and you're gonna make your whole monthly budget. Like, I like doing my whole monthly overview. So for everything in that month, groceries, personal funds, coffee, all of your bills, things like that, gasoline, you would go in and plug in all of your expenses for that month. So for the total month of September, that's how we want to start it. Let's say it's August right now and we want to start in September. So we're doing our 3-month overview in regards to the bill calendar, y'all. So our monthly overview, we will make our budget for September. Now, if you are not salary, you don't know how much you're going to get paid, just take the average of like your last 6 paychecks, 6 to 12, and just average it out. And when you do that, of course, it may be kind of tight when it comes to your non-essentials because you don't know if you're going to be making more or making less, but you will need to make sure that you have enough to cover all of your essentials. So plug your essentials in first, and then you can start working in your non-essentials. Once again, we're not going to go there in this video, but make your monthly overview for September, and then you are going to break it down by paycheck. So if you get paid twice a month, then you will do your split that budget up by paycheck 1 and paycheck 2, depending on which expenses that paycheck is going to take. So if we do it for September per paycheck, then we know for this paycheck, we're going to have to include cable, life insurance, daycare, as well as our student loan. And remember, we're starting the half payment method. So these are halved up. Paycheck number 1, you also need to include, half of therapy, half of your auto loan, whichever expenses you want to start breaking up. And then in this paycheck, you also need to include half of therapy and half of the auto loan. Now, you do want to get to a point where once you start breaking up these expenses, you try to carry that on throughout each month. So if the car note is broken up, it's one of those expenses that you use the half payment method on, then for October you need to make sure that you're doing that as well, just to get you into the habit as well as your account into the habit of taking half payments. And then when that payment is due, you have the full payment set aside, waiting in the account, ready to be paid. But it's important to break everything up per paycheck, because once again, you need to make sure that you have enough each paycheck to be able to do this. So for example, for paycheck number 1 of September, after we take out all of these expenses, half of therapy, half of the car note, daycare, student loan, and we start plugging in gas, groceries, and other things that we have that we pay out each month, if you find that it's a little too tight, like it literally leaves you nothing to work with, or you are in the negative, which means you don't have enough money to cover your expenses, you're going to have to come back out here and rework some things. So maybe you can't do half of therapy. Maybe you need just a little extra $30-$40 in your budget. That's fine. Take it out, because paycheck number 2 should be able to cover that. If you can't do half of the auto loan, maybe you don't break it up evenly this month. Maybe you take just $100 out of paycheck 1 to get into preparation for your half payment method. But whatever you need to do to work your numbers, whenever you get everything plugged in, that's going to be the time that you need to do it. Now, when I would do this for myself and with clients, I would take it up a notch. I also like to track the balance that would be in the account that the bills are going to be paid out of. If you're not new here, you know that I love a bills account. I like to separate my bills from my spending money, or just my non-essentials altogether. So I have an account that is specifically for bills. The money in that account is for my bills and nothing else. Nothing else goes in that account. Nothing else comes out of that account. And so here I made this resource in a different spreadsheet that I have, that I'm going to add over to the financial dashboard just for those who have it. But you can make something like this on your own. What you're going to do is, depending on your starting balance in that account, and when your expenses come out, it's going to help you keep track of where your account balance is going to be, because we don't want to run into an issue where an expense is being pulled out and we don't have enough to cover another expense that's being pulled out. We want to make sure that when a bill comes due, we have both parts of that bill to make the full amount, and it's not going to put us in the negative. So let's say that you want to mark a safe place to start working out of your budget, or working with, splitting up your expenses. Let's say we have a total of $160. I don't think that's too far off for, a lot of people's reality. Not everyone has thousands of dollars in their account. So we have a starting balance of $160, y'all. That is what's in our quote unquote bills account, or whatever account holds your bill money. Let's say it is not quite payday yet, but payday is coming up soon. So using our September, the month of September, we've paid those expenses that were needing to be paid on the 1st, and that left us with $160. So next up is the 3rd. We got our little paycheck. That was my bad, y'all. It needs to be in the deposit field. So okay, $800 came in. We got paid on the 3rd, and so now our balance is $960. Great, perfect. But cable is coming due. Cable is due on the 6th. So November 6th, our cable bill is due, and we have an average of $84.99. I'm pretty sure that's probably cable bills don't fluctuate. So $84.99, and let's say cable. So now we are at $875.01. Life insurance is coming out next. And we said our life insurance was $127. And that is due on the 12th. I'm just going to say it's 2023. Does not matter. Next up, we have daycare and student loans coming out on the 15th. All right, daycare is $516. This was an actual client's number. So $516 twice in a month. That was the 15th. All right, and then student debt was $84. All right, we're getting it's looking a little skimpy. So we'll see if we need to change anything. So student debt is also coming out on the 15th. All right, we made it. We made it by the hair on our chinny chin chins, but we made it. So next up is another payday. We get paid on the 17th. And that is another $800 deposit. Let's just say, you know, based on how much we projected our bills are, the bills that are actually being paid out of this account, it is going to require us to put back $800 per paycheck. Okay, so therapy is due on the 20th. Therapy is $65. And now, mind you, we started the half payment method for this one, which would mean that $800 would need to include that half of therapy from paycheck number 1 of the month for September. And then what comes next is Disney Plus on the 23rd. And then our auto loan. So Disney Plus is $12. I don't know what was going on there. Disney Plus is $12, and then our auto loan is $386, and that is due on the 25th. So you will just continue on for like the month of October and November. Just continue on plugging in your deposits as well as the amounts that are going to be taken out to make sure that whatever date you have to start working this new budget is going to work. Hopefully this was really helpful to you all, and I will catch y'all in the next video.